Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
I won't forgive you. That was the only thing I could say when I saw her standing in the kitchen, hair slightly tousled, wearing that faded gray t-shirt that wasn't mine. She heard me but didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even dare to look away from the cold tile floor. I waited, counting my own breaths, trying to push back the roar in my head. My heart hammered a punishing beat against my ribs, and all I kept thinking was that she had just whispered someone else's name in her sleep. I'd heard it at dawn. A single syllable, too quiet for the world outside to notice, but it might as well have been a thunderclap in my skull. Jack. She exhaled it with a slight moan, as if she dreamed of him in the same bed I paid for, under the same sheets we picked out together. For a moment, I lay there, paralyzed by betrayal, hearing the bedroom clock tick slower and louder, each second an echo of my rising fury. The fury was new, overshadowing that older ache of suspicion I'd been harboring for weeks. I'd tried to ignore the signs, the strange late-night texts, the sudden changes in her mood, the intangible distance in her eyes when I talked about our future. But hearing another man's name pass her lips in the silence before the first light of day crushed any illusions I tried to maintain. There was no rationalizing it anymore. I watched her get up from the bed that morning, slip into that t-shirt, run her fingers through her hair. I stayed motionless, my heart pounding, my mind half blurry with the tail end of sleep. Part of me wanted to grab her arm, force an explanation. Another part insisted that there was no explanation worth listening to. She didn't know I was awake. She didn't know I'd heard. She just left the room, drifting into the hallway toward the kitchen. I lay there another minute, half hoping I was stuck in a nightmare, half knowing that the worst kind of truth had finally shown its face. When I stood in the doorway and told her those 5 words, "I won't forgive you," her shoulders flinched. She tried to turn around to face me, but I stepped back, refusing to let her see the heartbreak behind my anger. I remember the scent of black coffee drifting from the coffee maker, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, and the sunlight slanting through the blinds, turning the dust motes into golden sparks. Everything seemed normal except for the storm in my chest. She started to speak. "Michael, please." I cut her off with a single raised hand. I didn't even look at her face, didn't want to see whatever expression of guilt or regret she might be mustering. Instead, I brushed past her, took a mug from the cabinet, poured coffee for myself, ignoring the trembling in my fingers. My jaw was clenched so tightly it hurt. Her voice shook. "Can we talk? Just let me explain." I lifted the mug to my lips, drank slowly, and set it down. Then I walked away. No more words. No accusations. Nothing. I felt a cold satisfaction in my silence, as if I could punish her by denying her the chance to plead. She followed me into the living room, her footsteps timid against the hardwood floor. "Michael." She tried again, but I kept walking. The only emotion I allowed myself was a bitter flicker of triumph when she finally went quiet, realizing I had no intention of giving her a conversation that might let her manipulate the story. She called another man's name while lying next to me. That was enough talk for the day. I was still under the same roof with her, but I felt an ocean between us. My phone buzzed on the table, some work notification. My mind automatically recognized the pattern. I'd check emails, maybe schedule a call, then get ready for the day. Familiar routine, yes, but the routine felt foreign now. My marriage was an illusion, my wife was a stranger, and the only real feeling left was the dull throbbing in my chest. I stepped into the hallway. The door to the kids' room was closed. They were still asleep. Our 2 sons, my whole life's pride. I swallowed. Anger churned in my gut because I couldn't let them wake up to see me like this. I had to hold it together. Breathe in, breathe out, walk into my own bedroom to get dressed. The quiet morning continued, each second pressing down on me with an invisible weight. When I returned, she stood by the living room window, arms wrapped around herself. She glanced over as I approached. I could see tears brimming in her eyes, but I refused to acknowledge them. She'd made her choice. I brushed by her again, pulled the front door open, and left without a word. Outside, the air was crisp. Clouds loomed overhead, a Chicago autumn sky threatening rain. I got into my car, slammed the door, took one shaky breath, and told myself I wouldn't cry. A man doesn't cry. Not over this. But God, how it burned inside. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked alien. Eyes bloodshot, lips pressed into a grim line. I turned the key in the ignition, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. I drove around for a while, aimless. At some point I ended up in a parking lot outside a hardware store, just staring out at the gray sky. My mind drifted to the first day I'd realized something was off. She'd been out with friends, and came back with her hair all tousled, smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't mine. I remember how I asked, half joking, cheating on me already, and how she forced an unsteady laugh, her face turning away. That was the beginning of the silent distance between us, but I still tried to rationalize it. Maybe she just hugged a friend wearing too much aftershave. Maybe she was stressed, needed more attention. I was a fool, so desperate to keep our family together that I wrote off every red flag. Then the phone calls started. She had an explanation for all of them. Work calls, she said, or an old college friend. She wasn't lying about the work part, though. She was indeed calling Jack, the travel manager, her boss of pleasures, as I'd later see in the texts. The day I discovered that name in her messages was the day I stopped sleeping properly. I confronted her about it once, lightly, but she shrugged me off with a practiced smile. "It's just a joke," she'd said. "He's in tourism, so I call him that because he arranges nice trips. You know how silly I can be." And I swallowed it, stupidly wanting to believe. I remember how a neighbor, an old man from the third floor, once told me he'd seen her leaving early in the morning in someone else's shirt. He said it quietly, apologetically, as though he felt sorry for me. I brushed him off. I told him he was probably confused, maybe saw her wearing some old t-shirt that I'd never worn in public. But he insisted. "Not your shirt," he said. "I know your figure, Michael." He didn't press it further. He let me absorb the humiliation in silence. That conversation ate away at me. So I tried to cling to the last scraps of hope. Maybe we could fix it. Maybe we just needed therapy or a vacation together. We'd been under pressure for months. Her father's disapproval, my job stress, the late bills, and the arguments about how to raise the kids. But on the day she whispered Jack's name in our bed, I knew it was far more than a rough patch. It was the end. Sitting in that parking lot, I hated myself for the nausea twisting my stomach. I was furious that I didn't walk into that kitchen and demand the truth, push her up against the wall, and ask if she'd lost all respect for me. But we had children. I feared the fallout. I dreaded seeing them caught in the crossfire of our collapsing marriage. And there was another thing, something that still clawed at my gut. The baby she'd had. For months, I pretended that little newborn was mine. She insisted. She said the timing made sense, told me all the comforting lies. Meanwhile, I tried to keep believing, ignoring the creeping suspicion that something didn't add up. That baby, now only a few months old, was too precious to me. I changed diapers, stayed up nights to rock him to sleep. But there was always that hateful whisper in the back of my mind. "He doesn't look like you. He's not yours." I rubbed my temples, recalling how I once even made a half-hearted joke about Jack Jr. because the baby had dark hair and big, soulful eyes. She paled, forced a bright laugh, then went to check on the roast in the oven. I stood in the kitchen, my chest tight, my nerves on fire. Now, in the car, the weight of that memory made me want to punch the steering wheel. Instead, I breathed in, breathed out, and told myself I had to face it. No more illusions. A few days later, I stepped into a pharmacy and bought a DNA test kit. The clerk at the counter gave me a polite but curious look. I was too rattled to even care. I took the kit home, locked myself in the bathroom with the baby, took the swabs, sealed them, then walked right back out without a word. She saw me, confusion clouding her eyes. I didn't bother explaining. If she had any sense, she probably knew exactly what I was doing. That week was the longest of my life. Every moment I spent alone with the baby, or with our older sons, hammered nails into my heart. Every time she tried to talk, I shut her down with a quiet stare. Some nights I slept on the couch. Other nights I stayed out late, driving empty roads, letting the highway hum numb my brain. I dreaded the results with every nerve in my body, and at the same time I needed to see them. I needed to end the limbo. When the message finally arrived, I was sitting in my car outside a dingy convenience store. The day was unusually hot, a blazing sun glaring through the windshield. My phone vibrated, a simple notification that the results were in. My finger hovered over the screen. I had never felt that level of dread, not even when my mother passed away, and I got the phone call from the hospital. This was a different kind of anguish, a betrayal of the man I believed I was. A husband, a father, the provider. I took a deep breath, opened the email, and scrolled. Not mine. The words that spelled it out were full of scientific jargon and disclaimers, but the meaning was clear. 0% probability. No paternal match. My chest tightened. My mouth went dry. I turned on the car's air conditioner as high as it would go, letting the mechanical whir roar in my ears to drown out the scream I felt rising from my gut. I reached into the glove compartment, rummaging blindly for anything to distract me. My fingers landed on an old receipt from the kid's last birthday party, and that was enough to break me. I felt a flash of white-hot fury, and a moment later, I slammed the receipt onto the dashboard so hard it tore. But I still didn't cry, couldn't. I was beyond tears, beyond shock. The dryness in my throat was replaced by a sour taste of disgust. Disgust at myself for living in denial, and at her for letting me. Days passed in a haze. I avoided her, barely speaking except in curt sentences about groceries or the kids' schedules. She tried cornering me at one point in the bedroom, grabbing my arm, tears glistening on her lashes. Her voice trembled as she said my name again and again, begging me to sit and talk. I pulled free, went into the bathroom, and locked the door. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I let silence be my weapon. She banged on the door, sobbed, pleaded, but eventually she gave up. When I came out, the hallway was empty. I considered calling a lawyer right away, but I wanted something more than just a legal exit. I needed her to understand how deeply she'd shattered me. I wanted a reckoning, something that would leave a permanent mark on her conscience. Not violence, I'm not that man, but a truth so devastating she'd never dismiss it. It came to me in a single stark vision. I would take my real children, the two sons who carried my blood, my name. I would walk out of that house with them, my documents in hand, leaving her with the emptiness she'd created. Before I could do that, I decided to confront her father, a stoic, sharp-eyed man who had always been critical of me. He'd insisted she could have done better, found someone wealthier, someone with more pedigree. Ironically, he was the one who once told me, "If you ever hurt my daughter, you'll answer to me." Now I intended to show him who had done the hurting. I drove to his apartment on a rainy evening. Traffic was brutal, the sky dark, headlights glaring off the slick streets. The moment I stepped into his tidy living room, I saw her father's gaze flicker with concern. He'd noticed the tension in my shoulders or the grim set of my mouth. Without preamble, I placed the manila envelope on his coffee table, right next to a decorative bowl of potpourri. Then I told him to open it. Inside were the printed screenshots of her text messages with Jack. They were explicit. Every scorching confession, every time she called him her boss of pleasures, and lines that made me grind my teeth just remembering them. He looked through them, his expression draining of color. Then came the DNA test results, just as damning. For several seconds, he said nothing. I felt the air thicken, the tension so heavy it was like a physical force. Finally, he looked up, eyes full of silent torment. He glanced behind me, and I realized she was there, having walked in from another room, or maybe she'd come with me, hoping to intercept this confrontation. I hadn't even noticed her. She stood by the door, face pale, hair damp from the rain, her gaze flicking between me and her father. I could almost see him question everything he believed about his daughter in that moment. The disapproval he used to direct at me was now overshadowed by his shock. She tried to speak, but he lifted his hand and shook his head. That gesture alone was enough to hush her. I watched her face crumble as her father's betrayal matched my own. She turned her eyes to me, but I offered no comfort, no absolution. He exhaled slowly, set the papers down, and after a long pause said, "I don't know what to say." His voice was low, subdued. The man had always struck me as an unshakable pillar of authority, but now he seemed so much smaller. "Is this what you raised?" I asked, my throat dry, my voice harassed. He didn't answer. The question lingered in the air, condemning us all. I turned and left the envelope on the table. My wife stood trembling by the door, eyes red and swollen, but I brushed past her once again. No words left to say. She reached for my sleeve, but I pulled away. 2 days later, I made good on my silent promise. I packed my bags, helped my boys gather their essentials, told them we were going for a little trip. They didn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation. I felt guilty lying to them, but I couldn't risk a dramatic showdown with her screaming or sobbing in front of them. So I quietly arranged for them to stay with me at a furnished short-term rental I'd found through a contact at work. My older son asked, "Is Mom coming?" And I just shook my head, told him she'd join us later. He frowned, but he didn't press further, picking up on the tension in my voice. By the time I was done, the living room was almost bare of our personal items. The baby's stroller sat by the front door. She stood next to it, tears glistening on her cheeks, arms limp at her sides, watching me load the last suitcase. Her eyes were hollow, voice barely above a whisper. "Please, don't leave me like this," she said. I froze for a moment, feeling my fists clench at my sides. The memory of the DNA test, of her calling out Jack's name, of her wearing that shirt that belonged to another man, all swirled in my mind, fueling my resolve. "You left me first," I said quietly. Then I opened the door. She reached out, but I stepped aside. The stroller remained in place, an ugly reminder of what was never really mine. For a split second, I let my eyes linger on it, on the tiny blanket folded inside. I felt that savage pang in my chest again. The knowledge that I had been lied to about so much, forced to raise a child that wasn't mine, give love that was stolen from me. But I swallowed it down, swallowed the urge to cry. A man doesn't cry. We walked out into the night. I put the boys in the back seat, buckled them in. She stood in the doorway, sorrow twisting her features. For a heartbeat, I caught her eyes, and all I saw was an empty reflection of the woman I once cherished. I drove away without looking back, the city lights stretching out in front of me, the hush in the car broken only by the children's soft questions about where we were going. My throat felt tight as I tried to reassure them that everything was all right, though my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Hours bowled into days, and days turned into a week. I arranged new living accommodations. The boys adapted surprisingly fast, though the older one asked about his mom often. I told him, "She'll join us soon," even though I knew that was never going to happen. Maybe I was too cowardly to lay it all out for them. Maybe I just needed time to figure out how to break it gently, or maybe I wanted to spare them my bitterness. Meanwhile, she called my phone relentlessly, leaving voicemails that started with anger, then turned to begging, then sorrow, then silence. I didn't pick up, didn't respond to the texts. She tried contacting my father, an old man living in rural Texas, but he refused to get involved. He barely knows how to handle family conflict beyond a few gruff words, and he'd long disapproved of how she treated me. One late evening, my phone buzzed again. This time I answered, mostly because I was in the middle of packing a lunch for the kids for school the next day, and my mind was busy with tasks, not locked in that cycle of bitterness. I said nothing. She spoke my name once, Michael, then started crying. Long, shuddering sobs. I let her cry, kept the phone to my ear, said nothing. No comfort, no condemnation. The weight of her tears didn't ease my own anguish, but it kept me pinned there, in that silent realm where I refused to let her off the hook. When her sobs died down, she whispered, "Tell me what to do," voice cracking. My jaws ached from clenching. What was there to say? That it's too late. That I would never touch her again, never trust her. That she destroyed the only peace of mind I'd ever known. I gripped the phone, inhaled once, then hung up. No words, just a click in her ear, letting the silence speak my rage for me. The next day, a process server rang the doorbell at our old house, handing her the divorce papers. She texted me, "You bastard," followed by, "I deserve a conversation, at least." I stared at the words on the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. She had asked for a conversation, yet she didn't give me the courtesy of honesty when she was sleeping with another man, carrying his child, forging a twisted lie that I'd fathered that baby. My thumbs hovered over the keypad. But I didn't type anything. I locked the phone and went to read the kids a bedtime story. That was my new routine, my fortress, my real legacy. My two sons, who still believed I was their anchor in a sea of confusion. In the midst of all this, I had to keep working. I'd drag myself to the office, keep up the professional face, close deals, attend conferences. My colleagues whispered about how tired I looked, how I'd grown quieter. But in sales, you can't afford to crumble. I clenched my teeth, forced an even tone, and sold. At times, I'd step outside to the parking lot, close my eyes, and see her face, see that baby who wasn't mine. The betrayal would swell up, threatening to choke me. Then I'd bury it, rush myself off, and return to my desk. Efficiency, performance, results. Cold, but reliable. In some twisted way, I took comfort in that routine. One evening, I got home from work to the short-term apartment, put dinner on the stove, and noticed the kids were a bit restless. The older one asked if Mom was sick, if that was why she couldn't come over. I knelt down, looked into his eyes, struggling to find the words. I told him, "Mom's not feeling well, buddy. She needs some time." He accepted it with a child's innocent faith, but I could see confusion behind his eyes. That same confusion stabbed me like a knife. I was lying to my son, acting like the monster in this scenario, ripping his mother away without explanation. But what could I say? That she'd turned our life into a sham. That she'd created a child with another man, a man who probably grinned while receiving my wife's late-night calls. Eventually that night, I felt an overwhelming numbness, a desire to just drive without a destination. So after they fell asleep, I left them with my sister, who had come to help. I got in my car and roamed the streets, passing bars and diners, closed shops and bright neon. At a red light, I found myself thinking of the day I first met her. She was radiant, fresh out of college, brimming with laughter. We talked for hours, ignorant of the world beyond our own circle of light. She was the kind of woman you'd gladly move mountains for. And for years, we built something that seemed solid, kids, a home, that shared dream of a life well lived. But somewhere along the way, we let the cracks form. And she let someone else slip in through those cracks. I ended up in a small diner off the interstate, ordered black coffee, and stared at my reflection in the window. I wanted to feel anger, but all I felt was an immense numbing vacuum. An older man in a booth across from me, probably in his 70s, was reading a newspaper. He caught my eye and gave a polite nod. I half smiled, sipping my coffee, and realized how disjointed my own life had become. I'd abandoned the home I paid for. I was living out of boxes. I was lying to my kids, and the woman I once cherished was alone with a baby that wasn't mine. Yet still, I had no tears. Weeks turned into months. The legal proceedings started moving forward. My lawyer assured me that with proof of paternity for the two older kids, plus the DNA results for the youngest, I'd have a strong position to secure custody. I told him I didn't want the child that wasn't mine to be anywhere near me. I didn't want to see that baby grow, a living reminder of her betrayal, of my humiliation as a man. My lawyer's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing. He's used to seeing bitterness in divorces, though maybe not this raw. The more she pleaded with him, through her own attorney, for shared custody, the more fiercely I resisted. I had a right to remove myself from that child's life, and ironically, she had no grounds to stop me. It was her baby with Jack after all. That's how the final lines were drawn. The older kids came with me, and she was left with the heartbreak of having lost her family. I was unyielding, fueled by a sense of wounded pride, by a thirst for vengeance that overshadowed any pity I might have once felt. Some nights, though, as the kids slept in the next room, I'd pour myself a glass of whiskey and stare at the blank TV screen in the dark. A question would bubble up. Had I done enough for them to keep their mother in their life? Was my coldness punishing the children as much as it was punishing her? But then I'd remember the texts, the phone calls, the baby's wide eyes that looked nothing like mine, the memory of her moaning Jack's name. My rage would flare anew, and I'd finish the whiskey in a single gulp, punishing my throat with the burn. The last time I saw her was at a mediation meeting about the kids' schedule. She looked thinner, her face drawn, her once lively eyes dull. She sat across the table from me, a manila folder of documents in front of her that her attorney had prepared. I could feel her trembling with tension. She tried to make small talk, something about the kids' soccer practice, or the younger boy's teacher praising his reading skills. I gave her nothing. Just short, clipped answers. The mediator, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, tried to keep the conversation civil, but it was futile. The bitterness in the room was suffocating. When the meeting ended, my wife, ex-wife, almost, reached out as if to touch my arm. I stood, grabbed my coat, and walked out. She didn't follow. Finally, the divorce was done. I got the official decree in the mail. Custody was decided in my favor for the older two, while she had minimal visitation. The court recognized that the third child was not biologically mine, so it was a separate matter entirely. She never contested it, maybe because she realized the futility, or maybe because her father threatened to cut off her financial support if she kept creating waves. I didn't care about the details. I just wanted my life back, free from her, free from the humiliation that had been choking me for so long. One quiet evening, I sat in the kids' new bedroom, blue walls, sports posters, bunk beds, and watched them sleep. The older boy stirred, rubbed his eyes, asked me why I was still awake. I told him to go back to sleep, and he did, trusting my reassurance. I stood up, silently walked out into the hallway, and flicked off the light. The darkness felt like a kind of solace, a cloak that hid my raw edges. So much had changed, so much trust had been broken, and yet I was still there, standing. Scared, yes, but not destroyed. I heard once that real freedom is found in the absence of illusions. Maybe that's what I felt in that moment, that heavy yet liberating sense of having survived the worst. She was gone. Jack was presumably off traveling somewhere, maybe or maybe not in her life anymore. I honestly didn't give a damn. The child was not mine, so there was no reason to carry that guilt or responsibility. I had my sons, my job, and a future I could shape on my terms. In the end, I realized I was empty of the rage that once fueled me. I was hollow, but also strangely calm. That night, after ensuring the kids were safe, I found myself stepping out into the chilly air behind our apartment building, leaning against a chain-link fence. Wind rustled the leaves overhead, the dim glow of a single street lamp casting wavering shadows on the pavement. I lit a cigarette, even though I'd quit smoking years ago. Let the smoke settle in my lungs, reminded me of my younger days. Before her, before fatherhood, before everything. I exhaled into the darkness, a shaky sigh that threatened to become something else. A tear, maybe. But I forced it back. Men don't cry. Isn't that what we're taught? We keep it all in, bury it, let it poison us slowly. Except I didn't feel poisoned. Not anymore. I felt the open wound cauterize, as if the worst had already come and gone. Sometimes a man has to walk away to stay whole. When I finished the cigarette, I flicked the butt to the ground, stomped on it, and stared at the sky for a moment. There were no stars visible. City lights drowned them out, but I imagined them there anyway. Lights in the darkness, like the hope I once had. Maybe I'd find a new hope one day, or maybe I'd just keep going. Either way, the silence around me was a comfort, not a curse. A week later, I drove by the old neighborhood to tie up some loose ends. There were mail forwarding details to finalize, a couple of leftover items. I parked across the street from our former building, but I couldn't force myself to get out of the car. I recognized the windows, the narrow balcony, the chipped paint near the entrance. It felt like peering into someone else's memory. Then I saw her step outside with the baby in her arms, rummaging in a purse for keys. She looked hollow, eyes shadowed, hair unkempt. The child squirmed, letting out a small cry. My chest tightened, but I reminded myself, I have no bond to that child. I do not owe them anything. She glanced up, maybe sensing my presence, but she didn't see me. I was too far away, the angle too steep. She walked down the steps, rummaged again in her purse, probably for the stroller that used to be in our hallway. A wave of bitterness rose in me, but it dissipated as quickly as it came. I'd already made my choice. There was nothing left to do or say. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine purred to life, but I paused, staring through the windshield, the sky reflecting in it like a sheet of silver. Then I pulled away from the curb. Each turn of the wheel felt final, like I was closing a door on that chapter of my life for good. When I got back, the kids ran to meet me, arms outstretched, jostling each other to be the first for a hug. I scooped them both up, feeling the solidity of their small bodies against me. In that instant, I realized that I had, in fact, found a sense of peace, the kind that comes from choosing yourself and the people who truly belong to you. Days later, her father called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. He apologized. He told me he never imagined his daughter could do something like that. There was shame in his voice, regret, maybe anger at her betrayal. I listened quietly, but I offered no forgiveness. When he was done, I said, "Don't ever contact me again," and hung up. That was the end of it. Time moved forward. I found a new condo, one with enough space for the kids to have their own rooms. My father visited once, awkwardly patting my back, not sure what to say but trying to show support in his gruff way. I took the kids fishing on a small lake outside the city, recalling how my own grandfather had shown me how to bait a hook when I was little. The normal rhythms of life began to settle in. Work, dinners, weekends at the park. At times, I'd catch myself gazing at the horizon and feeling an odd sense of gratitude that at least I knew the truth, that I wasn't living in a lie anymore. I never did speak to Jack, never confronted him face to face. Maybe he was out there, traveling the world, or maybe he'd moved on to another woman, leaving my wife behind like a discarded toy. It didn't matter. My revenge wasn't about him, or fists thrown in a barroom fight. My revenge was the silence, the emptiness I left behind, the truth that shattered her illusions. I took my pride back. I took my children back. She was the one left with an empty stroller and a vacant gaze, locked in a world of regrets. And me. I walked into the dark, because that's where I found the quiet, the space to breathe, the freedom to exist without her eyes on me. No more illusions, no more forced smiles, just me and my boys, forging ahead. Maybe one day I'll forgive her, or maybe not. Right now, I don't need to. The anger is gone, replaced by a calm acceptance that she's gone too. I have no more words for her, no more tears, no more heartbreak. I won't forgive her, but I can let her fade into the dim edges of memory. That, in its own way, is all the closure I need. The world keeps turning, the kids keep growing, and I am free. The night is dark, yes, but it's peaceful. And peace, I've learned, is worth everything.